For some background, for those of you who haven't been following along, I had rebuilt my SR for my S14 and I was gonna just clean it all up, throw it into the car, but then there were some things with the bay I didn't like, so I begged my friend Alan and his dad to paint the bay. They, after months of convincing, decided to take on the challenge, and here we are 3 months after I dropped the car off, and I'm very curious of how much work they put into this bay, because I know they've been working on it like a lot.
Hello. Hi. Hi.
It's crazy. So the last video you guys would have seen with anything related to my car and the motor was when I threw the SR together. In that video, I pretty much just did a full assembly of the motor minus the bottom end because my friend Nacho did it for me. But in that video, I did mention how I wanted my friend Alan and his dad to paint the engine bay on my car and also like shave the bay and stuff. That ended up happening. The car is right behind you guys. Now I'm gonna walk through everything they did. So for starters, they did a lot of work on this engine bay. There was like over 100 holes throughout the engine bay they shaved, and like brackets and stuff. If you guys were to look onto that side of the engine bay, you would notice the battery tray is now deleted, and they did still attach the windshield washer fluid bracket because I am still going to be running the washer tank. They also deleted a bunch of holes throughout the engine bay, like these. That used to be like a 1-inch hole. Other side too. If you guys looked in that video, I also mentioned how the previous owner had cut the strut towers right here. They were notched pretty much up to where my fingers are, which always bothered me from like the moment I got the car. It almost actually made me not buy the car, but I don't know. I kind of looked past it, and because of that, I just spent a lot of money redoing the bay just because this big factor right here. But yeah, now the strut towers are fixed. And I would say the biggest thing that Alan and his dad did, which is going to be hard to show on camera, is right here. They had actually cut from here to here in the wheel well and sectioned it up and re-welded this entire thing. So what that ended up doing was giving me like 1 inch more wheel clearance, because before I was rubbing all in here. So when you look from the inside of the bay, it looks like a factory wheel well, but there is so much more clearance than a factory wheel well. And then obviously the top of this core support is all shaved now. This area is all shaved. And they ended up painting the engine bay the factory color of the car, which is WK0, which is a 3-stage pearl white from Nissan. If you guys were to, I'm sorry for the jumping around by the way. If you guys were to look right here, you would see the difference between the color of the car right now, which is a lot more yellow, and the color of the engine bay. The idea behind this is we decided to paint the engine bay the color the car is supposed to be rather than the color the car is, because I am going to repaint the car eventually in like a couple years because of how many dents are all throughout the car. There's probably like 1,000 dents on this car. Our goal for today is we are going to be cleaning up the wheel wells using some red Scotch-Brites and some glass cleaner. And then we are gonna bash this pinch weld in right here to get a little bit more wheel clearance. This is pretty much gonna total the car, and it's gonna make it a lot flimsier and a piece of garbage, but I'm gonna do it because I need to install my knuckles, and I'm tired of people throwing like crazy entries when I can't. So yeah, I'm gonna total the car, bash this pinch weld, seam seal it afterwards, and then we're gonna Raptor line the wheel wells, and then hopefully we're gonna throw the motor in. And also, while we're right here, some things I did in my free time is actually cleaned up like little stuff. For example, the engine engine bay harness, where I put like a Tessa tape throughout the engine bay harness, took out all the old loom and just made it a lot nicer. The idea behind that is this is like a matte tape, and then the factory engine bay uses like a loom that's super thick. It's gloss black. It uses electrical tape, which is gloss black, and I feel like gloss black just stands out a lot more, so I use this to kind of make it blend more throughout the engine bay. And also over here we got some stuff I did throughout like my free time. I painted the front subframe because it was all chipping black. You guys could see here where the foam of the stand I was using got stuck to it, but whatever, we'll figure that out later. My Nismo power brace was all rusty because I bought it used, so I painted that along with the center section of the steering rack because it was all chipped off. For anyone wondering what is a perfect match for the Nismo silver on their like power braces and stuff, Pour 15 silver. It's literally the exact same color. If you guys were to look throughout this hole right here, I didn't paint the inside of this power brace, and it's the exact same silver. So I'm pretty sure that might be even the exact paint that Nismo uses, who knows. But yeah, you guys could see on this side where I was kind of like going at it already. I already had bashed this section. You can see it popped all the spot welds here, which is going to make the car super flimsy. A lot of people are going to tell me I should weld this. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to seam seal it, just not think about it. And this side is pretty much ready to be Raptor lined. I already cleaned it all up as much as I want to. Now we're going to go on ahead and do the other side on camera. So if you ever look up the instructions for installing bed liner, it always says to like prep the surface really well, scuff it up really well. I don't want to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use some glass cleaner and a red Scotch-Brite and just go to town in the wheel well. I think that'll be good enough prep, but I guess if it's not, you guys will see it because all this is documented. It has been a really long time since you guys seen the clip of me saying I was just going to do a quick scuff and shoot with a glass cleaner and a red Scotch-Brite. What ended up happening after that is me and the camera woman spent like 5 or 6 hours masking the engine bay. We're still not fully done on this side, but that side is done. I'm gonna walk you guys through how I masked it. So ignore this part. This is just preparing for the seam sealer on the pinch weld, but you guys could see that we used brown paper to mask off where we don't want to get sprayed, and the tape line we're gonna go with is from here at the bottom straight up to here, and then just dips down because this part is painted, so I figured to leave it like that. It's gonna go up through here and then straight down, and then basically this entire bottom section here is gonna get Raptor linered. And yeah, we still have to do that to the other side, but before we do that, because we're out of daylight and I don't want to make noise super late into the night, I'm gonna bash the pinch weld on the driver's side so I'm not making noise at like 10 p.m. To bash this pinch weld, I'm using a 3-pound sledgehammer, not a rubber mallet. That's not gonna do anything. Make sure it's a sledge. And the way I'm gonna bash it is in towards the inside instead of towards the outside, because I don't want this metal fold to face out. The reason for that is if the tire turns and does hit it, I don't want it to slice the tire. I'd rather it hit this smooth part. But yeah, I'm just gonna keep whacking this for probably like 30 minutes till the spot welds and everything are popped and the car is like a piece of paper, and we'll go from there. I'm out of breath now. That took all the air out of me, but you can see the pinch weld's flat now. What we're gonna do now is finish masking the car, because that way that's out of the way. After that, we're gonna clean the wheel wells one last time. Then I'm gonna mask where I want to seam seal, use some seam sealer on the exposed pinch weld. But before I put the seam sealer, I'm gonna put some self-etching primer on there too, because there's some bare metal now. And then we could finally Raptor line this. So what I did right here is I just masked off where I'm gonna be seam sealing. I kind of picked off as much of the old seam seal as I can off of it, which wasn't much. And now I got my 3M urethane seam sealer. I'm gonna put it on, and then afterwards I'm gonna use some brushes just to clean it up. The amount of times I wanted to give up on this project is insane because it seemed like nothing was going my way. After maybe like 8 hours of prep, the car is masked off. It's still not the best mask off job you can do, but the best I could do with my skill level and what I have. But the biggest issue we've been facing is I had this compressor since probably the day I was born, and I assumed it worked. It turned out I had a random thought that I should probably check to see if it was filled with water before we started Raptor lining. I opened the little drain thing on the bottom of it, probably like 4 gallons of water came out of it. And then after that, I turned it on and this thing had like 10,000 leaks that I've been trying to fix for like probably 2 hours. And we finally got it to a point that it's not leaking, it's holding 80 PSI. I have this setup all right here. I know a bunch of you guys are probably looking at this and saying, whoa, that is insanely wrong. It's because for some reason, the Raptor liner kit I got, the fitting here was broken. I didn't have another fitting. The only one I had was on this hose. So just to make it work, we're jerry-rigging this to the hose. After that, we got the regulator down here. And after that, we got the moisture trap all by my feet. But you can see here, the regulator is steady at 110. If I pull the trigger, which is going to be loud, it should stay at 40. It's staying at 40 PSI, so we're all good there. And yeah, we're pretty much ready to spray. All I have to do now is mix the hardener right over here in this cup, put it in a bottle, shake it, and we should be good to spray. Let's see how bad I mess this up. If you guys looked earlier, I was an idiot. I put the tube that goes on the bottom into the bottle in the front. I switched it back, put the tip back on. We're good now. Like that. So the camera woman and I just spent probably like an hour to an hour and a half unmasking the car. It turned out better than I expected because my expectations was we were going to accidentally Raptor line the entire engine bay, and that isn't entirely true. There was a little bit that got through, and just with some like Goo Gone and a microfiber, it all came off because the camera woman spent a lot of time scrubbing. But do you want to walk through all the imperfections? So some things I noticed after we took the paint off was some areas had like a reaction. I'm pretty sure it's because of the cleaner I used before paint. Right here, all the paint kind of like crumpled up. But thankfully you're not gonna see this part. Down here, it crumpled up. Along the frame rail on the very bottom, it crumpled up. And then at the end of the frame rail, some paint like pulled off. But more or less, everything actually came out really good. Like if you look at this, anywhere that your eyes will visually look at the engine bay, it's perfect, right? Mm-hmm. And then when you look at this side, where it actually didn't get messed up, it looks perfect. Like where you see the line between the Raptor liner and the engine bay paint. It's like perfect. This line is super straight. Down here is all perfect. I'm actually really happy with this. You happy?
Looks good.
But yeah, now that we're done with all the non-necessary stuff like Raptor lining wheel wells, which took a week, we could finally throw the trans on the engine, put the turbo on it, put the harness on it, and throw it into the car. But that's not going to happen until the guy who's doing my zinc plated stuff for the subframe bolts and stuff sends me the package over in like 2 days. So it's been a few days since we Raptor lined the wheel wells, and I finally got the bolts back from zinc, meaning I finally have the U-bolts back needed for the subframe. And so we could finally throw the motor into the car because we could finally mount the subframe into the car. And before we do that, we're gonna put the trans on the motor, and before we do that, we're gonna put the clutch onto the motor. And for the clutch, I have a Nismo high horsepower spec single disc. The reason I decided to go with a single disc versus a twin disc is just because I want my girlfriend to be able to drive the car easily. I want my family to be able to drive the car easily. And I think it'll be able to handle the power I want to make in the future. So, got a single. And then, while I had some free time over the course of a few days while I was waiting for those bolts, I did fully dress the motor. The reason I did this as I had free time and not just like documenting it is because if I want to make Raph in about a week, I needed to get stuff done. So you can see on this side.
You don't need to move it.
we got the turbo on the motor with all the zinc coated hard lines, new dipstick, painted power steering pump, and everything is just like refreshed and nice. The S15 turbo. And then I also went ahead and threw my old junk valve cover on because I don't want to scratch my new pretty one while putting the motor in. I put my Mazworks engine hoist brackets on temporarily so I could put my engine leveler on. And yeah, so what I'm going to start with right now is I'm going to mount my engine leveler to the motor itself, hoist it up, put it down, put the clutch on, put the trans on, and then I have a feeling I'm not going to be able to get it into the car in the garage. So what I think I'm going to have to do is actually mount the suspension back into the front of the car, pull it outside, and then jack it up, drop the subframe again, and then put it in. The reason for that is my garage door is like unusually low. I'm not sure if you guys could tell. Like, a garage door should not be this low. But yeah, let's get to it. So we just got the engine off the engine stand and onto a Rhino ramp just so it's low enough that I can put the clutch on and feel comfortable. What I'm going to start with is taking out this old brass pilot bearing, and I'm going to install a Nismo needle bearing. And to do that, I'm using a slide hammer because the bread method is just stupid. I don't know why people do that. So I got the old pilot bearing out using the slide hammer. It came out pretty easily. The only thing is, if you can notice, I cracked it on the way out, but other than that, this was in pretty good condition, so I could have still ran it. But the reason I took it out is because I'm going to a Nismo style needle bearing. If you see on the inside, this has a bunch of little needles in it, which should help with the input shaft of the trans spinning. And then to install that, I'm using a Mazworks pilot bearing installer tool, which all you have to do is take the pilot bearing, slide it on, and then just hammer it in. So the reason I'm using a Mazworks pilot bearing installer tool is it's double stepped. If you look on the pilot bearing right here, it steps to catch it right there, and then this step will set the depth of it correctly, because the most common problem with S chassis is people don't install these deep enough and then these shatter. So Mazworks made a tool. And then you see how deep it is in that hole. If you remember before, I had it flush because that's where I thought it was supposed to be. It turns out it's supposed to be way deeper than that. So it looks like it came with flywheel bolts. So if you're looking at this clutch kit and thinking you're gonna need flywheel bolts, you won't. They look like ARP, but they are not ARP. This is just like Nismo's bolts, so I'm not sure how good they are. I have ARP bolts, but I'm probably just not gonna use them because I'm pretty sure these are good enough. When the machine shop had originally done the machine work on the block, they had pulled these dowels that are used to align the bell housing to the block. And one thing I realized when I was putting them back in is they had actually lost one of the dowels that go right here. So I was just scrambling, went to a Nissan dealership, and surprisingly they had this dowel in stock. So now I got both dowels in. Before putting the flywheel, I'm putting the sandwich plate in because this is the thing that every single person forgets, including myself. It just slides right on. And now I could put the flywheel on, but first I'm going to put some Loctite on the bolts. And just from reading the instructions that came with the clutch, it said to torque it to 8.33 to 9.33 Newton meters. That's about 65 foot-pounds. So I got everything laid out to put the clutch disc and the pressure plate on. I already brake cleaned the flywheel and the pressure plate, and I searched up the torque spec for this hardware. It's 104 inch-pounds, so I already have the torque spec set on that. And one thing that I got that I wanted to show is this is an OS Geekin or Geiken clutch alignment tool, which is metal. This is a lot better than the plastic ones that come with clutch kits because it's less prone to slop. And when you're doing like a twin disc or more, you really want to use one of these. I don't really need it for this clutch, but I'm going to do it anyways. and you can see it just goes into the trans like that. So this isn't labeled, but typically where the spout is, that's the side that goes towards the trans, and the flat side goes towards the flywheel. Okay, so we got everything torqued on the clutch side. Now I'm going to take out the clutch alignment tool. But before I do that, I wanted to show the benefits of a metal clutch alignment tool. If you look here, there is zero play in this clutch alignment tool. When you pull it out, it's smooth. Here's a plastic one for comparison, and you can see, I'm not sure if you could see it, but you could definitely hear it. There's quite a bit of slop in there. And then the metal one, no slop. Before attaching the trans to the motor, first I'm going to be replacing some components that are worn out, like the throwout bearing, the dust spout, and the pivot ball. I already went ahead and pressed the old throwout bearing out from the sleeve. To do that, I just used a basic Amazon press kit with this cup and a 27mm socket. The 27mm socket is pretty much the perfect size to fit on the top section of the sleeve to help press it out. And so now we could press the new throwout bearing on. But before we do that, I wanted to show the old one, which does look pretty good. It does, well, it did make a lot of noise, but as I kept spinning it, the noise kind of went away, so that doesn't help for video. I'm going to be installing a new OEM one that came with the Nismo clutch. It's the same exact thing, dead silent. This one's a lot tighter. Also, going through this hole in the bell housing, there's typically this boot right here. You can see this one's missing a giant chunk. I don't know what happened there. That's how it's always been. So I got a new boot. I'm also going to grease right here where the pivot ball goes on the fork, along with the sleeve right here and the input shaft area. And speaking of the pivot ball, which is right over here, I'm going to unbolt this OEM one and put a Nismo one on, which is supposedly hardened. I don't think it's going to make a difference, but I already had it, so I'm just going to put it on. We're good. The motor is fully ready to go into the car. This is where the sketchy stuff begins. Like I mentioned earlier, we don't have any front suspension in this car, and we cannot get the motor in through the top. I couldn't think of a good way to get the bottom high enough to get the motor in through the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bolt the subframe into the car, and then place the subframe and the entire car on these wooden dollies, and then slide it outside, jack it back up and put it on jack stands, and then put it in through the top with the subframe out of the car. But yeah, hopefully this all goes smoothly. I don't think it will, but we'll see. It is 2:38 in the morning. We got the engine bolted into the car. We had the subframe bolted into the car. The trans isn't bolted in yet. Nothing else is bolted in yet. There's still no front suspension. But because of it being super late, we're just gonna put the front subframe back on the wooden dollies we did to bring it out, push it back in, and continue tomorrow. Okay, now we're actually done for the day, or done for the night, because we're going to continue on once we wake up. It's 3:30 a.m. Car's in the garage, motor's in, bolted, trans is in, bolted. There's no front suspension. We brought it back inside how we took it out on the wood dollies. And now we're going to call it a wraps, because we're going to have to wake up early, because at 9 a.m. we're going to go pick up my kit from Alan and his dad, because they just finished painting it. So at least the car will have a kit again. Tomorrow the goal is going to be to button up everything in the engine bay, and maybe it'll run by a day after that. I don't know, we'll see. But I'm tired. We'll continue later. We got the kit back from Alan this morning. I went ahead and jacked the car up, and while I was killing some time waiting for Guillermo to lower his car, I went on ahead and put the harness through the firewall with the camera women. So now what we're going to be doing is installing the suspension corners, because as you guys can see, there's no front suspension on the car. And yeah, hopefully everything goes smooth. Hopefully I don't scratch the hell out of the paint job, so we'll see. This is going to be finicky. So I knocked out a bunch of the boring stuff off camera, like the drive shaft, the exhaust, running the harness through the firewall, and a bunch of other little things. But now it's time to get to the interesting stuff, like the brake line relocation, electric fans, and all that. So first I'm gonna walk through everything I already did. So starting with the one thing I did wish I documented, I did do a battery relocation, but this is a very temporary setup because eventually I'm gonna run the battery into the spare tire area. So that entire corner is just temporary right now. The reason I wish I documented this is because the battery relocation kit I used was the one from the Wiring Specialties website, which just comes with like a bunch of generic size lines. And surprisingly, for this car, it pretty much ended up working perfect. The long wire I ran from the starter all the way back into the car from the harness grommet right here. Not sure if you guys will be able to pick that up, but the charging cable goes from the starter into the cabin right here, runs along the inside of the car through the quarter, and then it ends up right about here where I have the breaker they supplied behind the carpet, and then it goes from the breaker to a OEM cable right here that is part of the OEM harness. The reason I'm using this is because the terminal is bigger on this. The terminal that came on the Wiring Specialties website, or Wiring Specialties kit, was too small to fit on this battery. The ground wire, I'm using a Chase Bays grounding kit. And then this battery mount is for a Miata. What ended up happening was I didn't drill any holes here. I just kind of ovalized this hole, and then the hole that's on the top, I just kind of notched it, and it ended up working with the holes already in the chassis. The battery tie down is from my Blitz intercooler, and yeah, if that is a setup you guys are looking to do, that is a pretty solid setup. You won't have to make any lines or anything. After that, I obviously did the exhaust, drive shaft, and everything underneath the car. See, it's all done. And I went ahead and put all the front suspension together, including centering the steering rack and all of that. The only things I have left to do besides obviously putting the front end on this car and putting the kit on this car is going to be doing the brake lines and electric fan. Before we get into doing the electric fans and all that stuff, I just remember there was something I glanced over that I wanted to mention. So for the battery relocation on S chassis, you know there's two wires that come out of here from the fuse box into the battery terminal that plug into the terminal. What I ended up doing in here was there was a post right here on the fuse box, so I just put terminals on those two wires, bolted it there, attached one of the wires that came with the kit, ran that to the alternator, then ran a wire from the alternator to the starter, and then from the starter into the cabin where it goes to the back of the car. And that seems like it works pretty well. When I put the trunk, or when I lift the trunk, the lights in the cabin do turn on, so seems like we're good. But yeah, now what we're going to be getting to is doing the electric fans. For that I have a Phoenix fan and shroud combo and a Chase Bays electric fan harness. This is the one that uses the thermostat you put into the radiator, which is actually right here. So I wouldn't have to put a switch or anything, I just had to put that into the radiator. And the good thing about Koyo radiators is there is already a plug right there for the sensor. And then after that we're going to be getting to the brake lines, and for that I have a Z32 master cylinder and Chase Bays lines for that too. I went ahead and unboxed the Phoenix fan shroud and fan combo. The reason I decided to go with the Phoenix one is because it's black and I think it's a lot stealthier than all the other ones. And then I did go ahead and spread out the Chase Bays fan wiring just so you guys could get a good idea of this. There's basically right here all the relays, a ground, a positive wire, and then from there it goes to two wires to each fan, and then the thermostat that we're going to put into the radiator. But before I put the harness into the car, I want to bolt the shroud in just to make sure that I make the lines the correct length, because I have a feeling I'm going to have to extend the thermostat wire just because it seems very short. So yeah, we'll see. So I got the fans all wired up. I kind of just put my head down and went to grind mode because the wiring kit did not work at all really for this car. What I ended up having to do was cut the wires that came on the fans with the shroud, and then put the Deutsch connectors, I don't know how to say it, that came with the Chase Bays kit. But the problem was, the first problem, the terminal for the power was too small to put on the alternator. I tried to drill it out, it obviously didn't work, so I just cut it out and put a new one. But the bigger problem was I could not find a good spot to put this relay kit. What I ended up doing was I took the bracket off and I just put double-sided tape along the side and the bottom and stuck it on the frame rail, and that seems like the best solution. But yeah, it is all done now. You can see the sensor is right here on top of the radiator. It goes down to the relay kit. From here it's grounded on the frame rail. It goes through the bottom of the radiator where it's wired, and then it goes through here up and onto the alternator to get its power. Oh, and also these mounting points that are on the bottom of the fan shroud did not line up with the area they're supposed to attach at all, so I had to put a zip tie. They're like an inch to out, so I'm not sure if that's like a manufacturing defect or what. And I also went ahead and got Greddy hoses for the radiator, and I also got their dual bead clamps for everything I could. But you guys might notice, if you guys know about these clamps, that they're normally black. They all say Greddy. I think that's like kind of overkill and borderline tacky, so what I ended up doing was zinc plating all the Greddy clamps that I have. It's these. Now that I got the fans all figured out, I'm going to move on to the brakes, and for that I'm going to be using Chase Bays brake line delete kit along with a Z32 master cylinder, which I forgot I already bolted into the car. I'm going to try something different here where I'm not going to bench bleed it, which I normally would do just because I'm short on time and I want to drive the car. Hopefully that doesn't come around to bite me. Normally that's something I do, but whatever. But yeah, since there wasn't any clear instructions I could find on this, I'm going to put this right here. This short one goes to the front left, then the long one that has a bend on the end goes to the front right, and then the long one that's straight attaches to the U-joint right over here for the rear brakes on the back of the frame rail. And on the master cylinder, the very back one goes to this front left wheel. the middle one goes to the passenger side front, and the very forward one right here will go to the back brakes. This is hella hot. What the fuck? From my angle over here. First cranks. As you guys would have just heard, it cranked over pretty good. The light is still on the dash for the oil pressure, so I think that's just gonna be what it is. I'm just gonna send it. I put the fuel pump fuse in, and now we're just gonna try to start it. Attempt 2 with the jump pack on the battery.
Okay.
What number? Attempt number 3 after having the battery on the trickle charger. It's not fully charged, but I'm just gonna send it. It was at 3 out of 4 bars on the Noco Genius 10. Back, baby. It's running. Holy shit. The fucking roller coaster this car was. Holy shit. So as you guys would have seen, the car was running, and it was actually running pretty good. There was an issue, or what I thought was an issue, where the idle was kind of lumpy, and then I forgot that this thing has Tomei 256 cams, so I feel like that might have something to do with it. And then there was a leak on this side coming from this top bolt right here, but I tightened it and it stopped leaking. But then the big problem that I'm facing right now is I also noticed some coolant on top of the alternator right down there. I already wiped it, and I followed it up, and it was actually coming out of this bronze plunger right here behind the spring. Well, yeah, it won't focus on it, but it was coming out of that plunger. I'm not sure how that seals, but that is an issue because obviously I don't want coolant leaking out of a cooling system, and it's leaking right onto the alternator. And I'm having, like, I'm trying to search this up. I'm finding no info on how this thing seals, so that doesn't help. I guess I'm just going to pull it apart and see what's going on. Alright, so I got the throttle body off. It was kind of a pain because I spilled like a gallon of coolant on the floor, and then just had to rush and clean it up before I got to my dog. And yeah, here's the throttle body. It was leaking out of this plunger right here. So now I'm just gonna take it apart and see what's going on here. But it was coming out of the bottom of this, I believe. Just to make the event that's happening in a few days, I did bypass that little heater control valve thing on the throttle body just by looping the lines. This line here used to go up to the throttle body, but instead now it just connects here, and there used to be a line that would go from right here to this port. But now they're just looped. There shouldn't be any coolant leaks, and we can button this up. And also I did have a challenge because when I took this Phillips head out right here, the plunger shot out and would not go back in, so I just had to pry really bad and I got it back in. But whatever. Small, if you think about it, having one little problem like that is not bad for a full-on like rebuild and starting a car. So I'm kind of just happy that we're moving forward. So I just let this thing idle for like 30 minutes and got the timing all set up along with the TPS and everything. So now I'm going to drain out the break-in oil, change the oil filter, and switch to the oil that I'm going to be running. For break-in, I use Lucas 30 weight break-in oil just because it was like cheap. Now I'm going to be switching to what I normally use, which is AMS oil 1040. This is not cheap, but this motor isn't cheap, so it's kind of like insurance. Valid?
Valid.
I got a little helper now. He's going to help me put the hood on. And then I'm actually going to try driving this car to a little meet down the street. Hopefully everything goes well. But yeah, Gotta change the oil first. Alright, we're about to drain the brake-in oil. How much metal do you think is going to be on the drain plug?
About 5 pieces.
5 pieces? Alright, let's see. Oh shit. Oh! Hey, look how clear it is because it only has like 20 minutes of runtime on it. There's no metal on this, look. I think we're good. I think this motor is going to be good. So I just went for my first drive in this thing, and surprisingly everything went pretty smoothly other than the fact this thing wants to stall at idle, and I think that's just because cams, stock ECU, it doesn't like to idle. But now, me, Mark, and Raymond are scrubbing the hell out of the bottom of the hood to try to get it to at least look presentable in the car. You can see what it looks like when we scrub it, and what it looked like. Oh, this is even still kind of scrubbed, but this hood is chalked. We gotta bring it back to life, huh? As you guys might know, it has been a hectic week to get this car completed in time to drive Raph, which is an event we host with Aimless and Uprise for NorCal drivers. But as you guys can see, the car is now somewhat completed. The last thing you guys would have seen was me, Raymond, and Mark staying up late night cleaning the underside of the hood before we threw it on the car. After that, what ended up happening was we basically all just locked in because that was the day before I had to drive the car up to Manteca to pick up the kit for the car, and then up to Thunder Hill for Raph. So we stayed up really late. My friend Joe came over and we actually got the hood put on along with buttoning up the rest of the front end. Dialed in the car, got it running, and shout out Joe. He put so much effort into getting the front end to line up perfectly. So my hood gap, my fender gaps, everything is super spot on, which is insane considering on his own car, his panel gaps are dog shit. No offense, Joe, but you have a full fiberglass front end. It is never gonna compete. But yeah, as you guys can see, the car is in one piece. The kit is on. One thing I don't think I actually showed is as I had free time, I fully stripped the spray paint off the kit that used to be on it and just did some minor repairs. The bumper used to be cracked, the side skirts were cracked, the valences were cracked, the bumper was melted in the back. I fixed all of that as I had free time, dropped the kit off to Alan and his dad, who are the same people who did the engine bay, and they did me a last second favor and got the kit painted. What I ended up doing was locking in, getting the car running, drove it all the way to Manteca where they're at, put the kit on, then drove all the way to Thunder Hill. But yeah, the car is pretty much completed. I actually did end up driving Raph a couple days ago, and the car did perfect. I was on red line the entire time. I did not break in the motor. I did the exact opposite thing I was supposed to do, but it was just like I haven't driven in 2 years. All my friends were there. I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to enjoy myself, and the car took it. Like it's not in one piece, but it's mainly in one piece. I already kind of cleaned up over here. I wish you guys could have seen it, but I was kind of impatient. I didn't want to stain the paint. What ended up happening is somewhere over here, either the turbo's leaking or a coolant line's leaking, and there's the coolant that got sprayed all throughout the side of the engine bay. Also, one of my brake lines moved. I put a zip tie here temporarily, but it started touching the turbo and got melted right here, and it's about to burst through, so I need to get a new brake line. But other than those two minor things, oh, and then I wanted to give my grandparents some ride-alongs in the car because they had kind of like watched me from start to finish put this car together, and I just wanted them to experience like what I've been doing. And of course, right before I was giving them a ride-along, the starter gave out, so we had to bump start it. Then I gave them ride-alongs. They were out of breath because they're old, but shout out them for pushing the car. And yeah, now I need a starter. Car's in one piece, as you guys can see. Side skirts are on. They're pretty close in terms of paint match. The thing that sucks about this car is every panel is a different shade of white, so they paint matched it to that fender, but that fender doesn't match anything else on the car. Rear bumper, valences, the interior is all put together. And yeah, the car did really well at Raph. Shout out to everyone who pulled up. I cannot thank you guys enough for pulling up deep. I cannot thank you guys enough for the amount of support you guys give us. All the spectators, all the drivers, all the boots, everyone who pulled up to gallery, everyone who shows love on social media, everyone who just shows love in general. I love you all. Thank you guys so much. And on the topic of boots, I want to say thank you so much to, like, first of all, Never Content Austin. I understand you had something come up, so you couldn't make it. No hard feelings. You're just gonna have to make the next one. Thank you, Cario's Garage, for pulling up. For those of you guys that don't know, you guys aren't gonna be able to see it, but I have Mark Silver IS behind the camera woman, and the front Neo bumper off that car we actually picked up from you guys at Curio's Garage. So thank you so much for that. It was nice meeting you guys again. And shout out Flock. I love you. I'm gonna get one of your gauges whenever I can figure out how to fit it somewhere in the interior, because I have like a weird size gauge pod. Shout out Stealth. Shout out everyone. Shout out Garage Speed. You guys pull up deep every single year. You guys always pop out. Big ass crew. Driving. Shout out Close Calls for pulling up. Shout out my man Derek. He came all the way from SoCal, street drove his S14. He's actually the guy that designed the pinstripe on my car and put so much effort into that aimless pinstripe in the back. I was being very nitpicky with him about what I wanted. At the same time, I'm not really good about expressing what I want. So he was kind of like solving the hardest puzzle of all time, and somehow he solved it in a way that's better than I could ever imagine. So I love you, Derek. Thank you for popping out. It was nice to finally meet you in person. It's insane you made that drive, and I love you. And the biggest one, shout out my man Jacob from Get Japan. Not only did he pop out with like one of the craziest boots, where he brought full sets of wheels, seats, steering wheels, SR pink valve cover that I tried so hard to buy, but for some reason he wanted to tease me, put it in the front, and would not let me buy it. He said, I actually just brought this just to show it. Like, why would you put that there? Obviously I want to buy that. But yeah, shout out Jacob. He kind of surprised me, and he actually brought a bunch of stuff I got using their container service. These seats were not on their site along with this rear lip. I actually did use their container service to bring it in though. And my original plan was to pick it up whenever I go down to SoCal to pick up my stuff from Chrome. But he did me the fattest favor and brought it up for me. So shout out Jacob at Get Japan so much. These blue Zeta 3s are not for this car. It's for my other car that you guys will see in the future. The blue is a hint though. Shout out Checkpoint Japan. I cannot wait until I can see the video you guys put out. Shout out everyone who supported the SR rebuild and just like watched me yap for like hours on end. There is obviously going to be a lot more going on. As you guys know, I threw the stock ECU on this thing for now with the stock injectors, S15 turbo, and this is a fully built SR that is balanced rotating assembly, dual valve guides. It's a really capable motor. I'm not capitalizing on it right now because I'm out of money. So whenever I have money, I am going to put a Mazworks G25 tubular kit on it, and I am going to put a Link ECU on it, which I already do have, but I knew I would not have time to install it and tune it in time for Raph. So the next things coming up for the car are going to be that. I also do have a knob on lip for it, Bomex skirts, which are all hidden throughout the garage. You're not going to be able to see it. And then this rear lip that I got from the container I Get Japan. So you guys will see some exterior changes over time. And yeah, thank you guys so much for keeping up with this video. Thank you guys so much for hearing me yap for so long. And if you guys are interested in what I do with this thing, there's going to be a lot more. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I love you all.